5 minutes.
Okay, starting now.
Hit us.
Rock on. Thank you, James. Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate you guys taking time out of your busy schedules to do this with me. Second time with you, Jeff, and this time, as you can tell, I'm slightly more prepared. I kept it simple, easy.
It's great.
To the point. So, since James said today that he would be interested in doing the interview and you didn't know, I changed up my approach, and this is what I was thinking. So, the setup for this talk is as follows. I, at the prompter, will say a word or topic either speaker can talk about whatever comes to mind. I'm kind of treating this, Jeff, like an unofficial mini panel.
Yeah, I can see where you're going with it. We don't know the topic, and we're gonna chat with each other for a bit.
And I'm gonna keep it to your style, and I'm just gonna tell you these topics or ideas, and just let you kind of go with it. Whatever you want to talk about, whatever comes to mind. Maybe you want to talk about something with James. Whatever you want to do.
I doubt I want to talk about anything.
Probably
with
doesn't.
James.
Probably could care less.
We're over it.
And the context I was telling James, Jeff, is there's a YouTube channel called The School of Life. I don't know if you're familiar with it. Essentially what the premise is they talk about things that are not taught in school. I think this is pretty cool, and not only that these topics and ideas are of very significant importance, especially today. And that being the case, I chose some ones that I thought were really cool that I'd love to learn more about, and just love to hear what your guys' thoughts are on them. So in that way, I was thinking this would just be a nice experiment of sorts.
Brilliant.
If it works, it works, and if not, it's all good.
What
I'm
would,
glad
what
I
would
could have
not
you.
working mean?
Oh, just true. Well, in that regard, thank you both for being here.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, so let's see. I'm throwing my things a little bit. Okay, let's go with a good one. Oh, a random one. So the first topic that I'd like to throw out to either of you to respond to or talk about is the weakness of strength. And think about it for a moment.
Yeah.
And once again, it kind of has a formal tone to it, but I very much am approaching this somewhat informally.
No,
I would feel pretty informal. I can start this one.
You can?
Yeah.
Go for it.
I think when things are totally pervasive in our culture, in our world, we don't even notice them. And I think that what's become just kind of blindingly clear in my eyes over the last 2 years is one of the epidemics that is in the Western world right now, and it is that you should be able to do everything yourself. And in some of these developmental theories, like we were just talking about earlier, like Wilhelm Reich's developmental theories, this is called the oral compensation phase. And this is what happens to a baby when they give up on receiving proper nourishment from their mother. And they decide that the safest thing is to push away the feeling of need for nourishment, to disassociate completely from it, and to feel like they have to take care of everything themselves. Now, it's one thing when that happens to you because you weren't properly nourished or anything like that, but in our culture, that's actually become praised. It's not even that it's like something that people have had to go through. It's actually looked up to as the goal of, especially men. It's looked at everyone in Western culture, but especially men are faced with this idea that any sign of showing weakness is going to make you unworthy of love. And, I've talked to now a lot of healers in the world about this kind of trend, and they always related back to war. And the fact that when our grandfathers and even further back were sent to war and asked to kill other people, which is very hard for us to really put ourselves in the shoes of someone who's literally looking down someone and going to end their life. The only way to do that is to shut off your entire connection to your own body and to the grief and to the intense fear that you have. And you have to disassociate and numb yourself. And when you numb yourself, you feel very strong because you don't sense your own weakness. And you start to your priorities become, is everyone else okay? But you've completely disconnected from where your actual intuition comes from, and your heart and gut tell you how to move around. And I've been working on a lot of this myself, and basically everyone that that I know that works on anything about themselves. Like, this is one of the major themes, and it's this kind of, when you look at teenagers coming of age now, especially men, you see that it's just terrifying to be vulnerable with your male teenage friends, and in our culture, at least women can go be with other women and like lean on each other and cry with each other, but for a guy to be the first guy in his group to do something like that is like totally terrifying, you know? And the irony of that is that you never get the examples or the counterexamples that if you lean on your friends, they actually will support you and they actually want to support you, and it brings all of you closer. And we like kind of, without testing the edges of that thing, we build ourselves into this tighter and tighter walls where we think we have to do everything ourselves. And then you can do pretty good yourself, but you don't tend to do great yourself. And you kind of stop leveraging all the power of the whole community around you, and you cut off your kind of strength. That's enough of a start monologue.
Yeah. No, and I'll pick up where Jeff actually left off in actually creating groups. I found in my experience that it's very hard to support someone when they're trying to be strong. Whereas if someone is being authentic and vulnerable, me as a team member, I feel very, very compelled to support them in any way that I can. And it's a very difficult skill to manage, to say, all right, you actually have to try and be very explicit about your weaknesses or the places where you don't feel as strong, in order to have people to really get behind the initiatives that you may be pushing on. And I think that's probably one of the lessons that I've learned, that I'm the most happy I've learned in the last 5 or 6 years. And it's a learning that takes place over many, many years, because when you first hear it, you're like, oh, okay, so I just have to not be so strong, right? But then you get a little bit deeper into it. It's like, no, but you have to be authentically vulnerable, right? You can't just be like, hey, I can't do this on my own, guys, help me out, right? But then to be able to say, this is where I'm worried about, and then to say, oh, but even there's many different levels of authenticity, right? So there's the authentic of like, hey, literally from a tactical point of view in this organization, I can't do this marketing study without the help of the marketing, versus for me, personally, in my professional goals, I want to be seen as someone who can lead multidisciplinary teams, and if I fail at doing this with you people, then I'm not going to be able to have the impact that I want to have in this organization. To the next level, where me as someone who exists in this universe, as someone who has emotions, as someone who has dreams, aspirations, who has a family, who has friends outside of this organization, I'm passionate about these things in an abstract but deeply personal way. Like how much more vulnerable can you get, and how much more authentic can you get? I haven't hit the bottom yet. I'm always surprised at how you can go further and further and further, and it becomes more and more positive, the response that I get from my teams. So that's sort of the way I would take that, of the weakness of strength.
Yeah. Someone told me one time that the goal is not pleasure, the goal is depth. And that really was an amazing solidification of a lot of complexity. And the more I look at it, the more that I find out what he was saying. The more vulnerability you show, the more that, or experience, the more you realize how much more there is under there. Yeah. And you're just like, oh God, like I actually have to go into that too. And that's like the sign that you should go in that direction. Like right. The resistance itself is the indicator of the direction. The hesitance you have is the intuition that the intelligence wants to work out, and the mind says, I'm supposed to be happy. I'm supposed to experience positive emotions. I'm supposed to experience strength, and it actually keeps you from true positive emotion and true strength, because all your life force is clenched all of a sudden. Just to take it to a little more extreme example, like it was a week ago, I was processing a huge amount of that, and just totally breaking down in a really safe community of people that are all doing this in a safe environment for each other. And I had 5 people supporting me, and I had a guy who I was literally leaning on. I was just sobbing and shaking, and like stuff from that I don't even remember where it came from. It was just getting processed out of my body. I had someone holding my feet, singing to me. I had a man, for the first time in my life, a man holding my hand like a father who was just there. And a lot of people, myself included, have had trouble going into that space. And I found that I was holding this guy's hand, and the fact that I was going there was bringing him there. Because if it was just attention on him, it was going to bring all these blocks up, but he was being there for me, and he was feeling what was processing through me, and it was immediately processing it through him as well. And it was so interesting how much closer I was with those 5 people 5 minutes after that thing than how I had ever been with them before. And you just get this example in your life that says, actually, people want this. People are all craving this kind of closeness and intimacy, but no one wants to be first, because it could be a really dangerous thing to be first.
Very cool. Thank you, guys.
It's pretty fun.
Very interesting. Wow.
Now the strength of weakness. The neutrality of neutrality.
Well, how about... let's shake it up a little bit. This one... Oh, yeah, I'll just throw this one out. I'd love to hear both of yours. Why we should draw more.
Wow. So there's 2 things in life, speaking to strength of weakness and weakness of strength, there are 2 things in my life that I just have written off completely of saying, nope, not your thing. One is singing. I'm like, no, I just won't succeed at singing. And the other one is drawing. I'm like, those are just 2 things that I have never ever had any level of success at. Everything has just been terrible. Like the sound that I make with my mouth is never anywhere close to the sound that I was hoping it would be, and the thing that comes out of my hand when I try and draw has never come out to look like what I wanted to do. However, there are 2 things that I remember really loving when I actually was doing art class in middle school. One was mechanical drafting, where you have like this vanishing point, and you have to kind of construct these abstract rooms. And for me, it was absurd to just see, wow, without actually, by imposing all of these rules, all of these regulations, and like even having a straight edge that keeps me from deviating from the line that I want to make, it ended up being a liberating experience where I could be immensely creative and create these totally bizarre, not even possible rooms, constructs, and spaces. So that was one thing that where I had success in drawing. And then the other place was whenever it had to do with dreams. If I had an image in a dream, for some reason, I never had a problem making it resemble what, at least in my dream, I was feeling. Like I could emotionally or even mentally in some cases recreate the surrealness of the dreams that I was experiencing in a way through drawing. So for me, when you say why we should draw more, it's a little bit like, well, what did I give up by very early in life saying, okay, drawing is just not a thing I can do, and singing is not a thing I can do. And when I realized that it's probably been about, oh my gosh, I must have been 10 years old, so it's been 28 years since I think I've just drawn really for fun, right? I think I've left some aspect of that failure and that discovery behind. And so for me, when you say why I should draw more, I'm realizing, did I give that up too early? Right? Did I just pass that aside? How differently would I be? How differently would I be as a director, as a creator, if I had allowed myself to struggle? The pragmatic part of me says, every second you didn't spend trying to draw or sing was a chance that you got to play guitar or that you got to work on your handstands or something. So I recognize that, as much as we'd love to do everything, you do have to make choices. But I do wonder if I didn't, if I lost the opportunity to explore my dreams more deeply, or if I lost the experience to uncover mechanically areas of my psyche that I've never explored.
So yeah, that brings up a lot of things for me. One of them, I think, specific to people that are polymaths, is you get really good at something and you compare your skill at everything else to your skill in that one thing. And I think probably even by the time you were 10, you were probably so good at some other stuff that the first 100 or 1,000 hours of drawing were never going to measure up to the skill that you already had in something else. And I think that creates a kind of psychological thing that doesn't exist until you already have some field that feels really like you've gotten to the flow, you've gotten to the expertise. And I, just meet a lot of people that are experts in things, and they tend to be more hesitant to start the other thing. And so that's like one pattern. Another pattern that I think references the previous question we talked about is this possibility that the thing that we resist has the most information for us and the most potency for us. And I think when when you sit down and draw, if you're not drawing all the time, and I draw once in a while, but it's definitely, most of my drawing happens now like in computer programming. It's like drawing through code, or you can draw through handstands and all this kind of thing. So in that sense, we're all drawing. But I'm trying to regain my train of thought here. Oh, there were a couple things. One of them was there are different. Oh yeah. Basically, whatever offers the most resistance is the most deeply tied to some kind of protection that's going on and some kind of vulnerability that's going on. And I guess lately just have felt more and more this kind of clarity in going toward the thing that doesn't feel comfortable, and that immediately is going to like open up. He used this kind of room analogy with the perspective. It's like you go into a room that's uncomfortable and you see that there's all these other doors, but you didn't even know those doors were there, and then they open even a deeper, weirder discomfort, and it's like you kind of work your way, and all of a sudden you're an expert in your thing, but it's been through finding your boundaries all the time and kind of exploring those edges. There's also very different ways that people find ease in creativity, and I think there's a lot of ways you could talk about it, but the easiest separation I know of is that some people find creativity through flowiness, I should say, not flow like psychological flow, through flowiness and waviness and give me a crayon. And some people find the easiest creativity through structure and through imposing scaffoldings and modularity and all this kind of thing. And I'm someone who's an artist who makes a lot of flowy things. It always starts with structure. It always starts with some kind of mathematical thing I want to look at, or some kind of way to break things down. And once I'm in that space, I can find flowiness and explore flowiness and be really comfortable. But someone right next to me, maybe exactly the opposite. They might be able to get to a structured kind of thing. It has to start with them just taking a bunch of markers and doing this for a lot of time. And then they'll start to see the structure. And I think people need to find their channel, and it's a really interesting thing when you know that you have some kind of edge that's bringing up resistance. You can first go through your resiliency and your strength, and then go use that to get to the weakness. You don't have to be as weak as possible and unresourced as possible. You can find what's in you that's comfortable, and then go to this thing that brings discomfort and kind of work with it. So I think there's something to be said for people to start to sense into what are the things that just make me feel most at ease, and how do I use that to get to these other spots? How do I use dancing to feel okay doing my tax spreadsheet? Because it may be if I get myself in that flow, then I feel really at ease to do this stuff. But if I go right at it, I'm going to hurt myself.
That reminds me of a panelist, Matthew Nelson, who's new this year. I'm pretty sure he's new. He's a dancer, and he was at a panel, and he was talking. He was about 5 minutes, and he lost his train of thought. He went, oh. And he just danced his way out of it, and then brought himself back to what he was talking about. And just the idea of, I don't know, the flowiness, the creativity, bringing it back up. It's really cool. Thank you. Let's see. Which one? Pick randomly. Hoo-ha. What about? Ooh, great one. Friendship and vulnerability.
Yeah. What's the difference?
Yeah, I feel that.
And you do have creative liberty with these too.
So here's what's funny for me. I find it easier and easier in life to be vulnerable, but I find it harder and harder in life to make new friends.
Interesting.
But I do find it easier and easier to meet people. My friends, really my friends, are still coming from a time in my life where I feel that I was the least vulnerable person, which is really, really strange. And yet it's not that I wasn't vulnerable with those people. I don't really know what's driving that. Maybe there's something in the process of when we're young and maybe a little bit less self-aware and willing to kind of deal with the artifice and to deal with the strength or the macho-ness and to bond over foolish things and to realize that there are sort of soft beings underneath. The process of becoming vulnerable binds us together in a very memorable way, whereby now when I meet people I feel like I drive discussion really into really interesting deep places. We have really interesting and emotive connection, but it almost feels like it almost became, it is easy to see as a transactional kind of one-time, oh, thanks for that. Thanks for the ability to discuss on that. But it's much harder to have a continuity. And I don't know, maybe a big part of my life is because of the transient nature of where I am. I've never really been in one place for a really long time, so there's that aspect as well. So maybe I'm misreading it. Maybe I'm misreading as it's become easier for me to be more vulnerable, it's harder to create more friendships. Maybe it's the vulnerability has come over miles and miles of traveling on the road, and unfortunately the cost of that is I have no problem being vulnerable really quickly with people, but I don't have the time. I don't have that ability to create that time the way you would at MIT for 4 or 5 years to really bind with people, to see them in every color, every tonality of the human experience, to see them when they're angry, to see them when they're upset. When you travel very briefly, you can kind of be at your best, and you get to see people at their best, and you can kind of pass away, and so it's a challenge. That's my immediate reaction.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. There's something about shared hardship and shared turmoil and just being with each other over time and cooking meals and things like that that fuses you to other people, and in our world that's all about artifice, and it's rare to find people that are comfortable going beneath artifice, and you can't really push that on somebody because and I've used to try to do that, as I was starting to get into meditation, starting to open up to stuff in myself, I would start to push that on other people. And if someone's not ready to feel that stuff, you're just going to make everything worse. And I did that to people, and I had to apologize to them years later. Like, it was an unconscious activity, but people have to bring themselves to that kind of vulnerability. And so a lot of the time, if you start getting into that place, there's just certain people you just keep a certain distance from because you'll not be able to go where you want to go. And I think there's a lot of pragmatism in what James is saying. It's like if some of these things are about sharing space with each other, and literally like we don't take almost any heed to the fact that like most of our intimacy is like through our animal selves, through like smelling the people that we're with unconsciously, and like getting all of these like millions of molecular signals from shared space. And our minds think that we get the same connection when we have a Facebook message with someone, but our bodies don't get that connection, and we crave that sharedness. We crave like some of the most effective therapies I've seen for people. The only difference between them and a typical psychotherapy thing is that the psychotherapist has his hand on your shoulder or his hand in your hand. And that so deeply changes your mammalian brain and its reaction and its feeling of safety and intimacy. And I guess I would, referring to the first question you asked, like, it took me like 35 years to realize any of that mattered at all. That it wasn't just about having similar interests and having a conversation about something cool. Like, to me, that was what friendship was for a long time, and I didn't realize that the people I ended up being closest with, like, my best friend is from 3 years old, we were closest friends, and it's been 35 more years, and it took us 20 or 30 of those years to realize that we were super close friends because our family structures and personality patterns and defense systems were the same because of our structures, and we were loved each other because we needed to have the same skillful patterns of keeping ourselves safe. And I think it took me decades to start to see those patterns in my relationships with people. And when my favorite example lately is like, if you think back to the people that you were hot for when you were a teenager, those were your patterns trying to find patterns that helped each other stay safe. It was not trying to help you find your vulnerability. It was trying to help you protect yourself from feeling pain. And certain people become representatives of exactly what will help you get that missing piece in yourself. And it's like now when I start getting attracted to someone, I try to like look at them and subtract out the first person I ever loved and see if there's anything left. And if there's nothing left, I turn away. I go meet someone else.
Yeah, it's funny. It's definitely necessary, but I think we're arriving at a place where it's not sufficient. There's these other things, the shared space, a shared experience, and as much as I have great friends from MIT, which was a very mental time of my life, I think about the quality of those relationships, and we still pick up where we left off. But it tends to be discussions about cool things and cool ideas and things we heard about. But I think about my friends from circus school, which was a very different context. it's interesting because it doesn't matter who they were. It doesn't matter if we were friends, if we hated each other when we were in circus school. And I had lots of people who were like my enemy, and I was their enemy, and it was just like everything they think about art is wrong, and they're doing it the wrong. Oh, they're so commercial, they're such a sellout, whatever it was. And these were very real things when all you do is 24 hours a day art for 3 years of your life. And what's funny to me is that all of us, the 18 of us, or if I broaden it, the 36 or even the 72, all the people I went to school with, all of that for some reason has gone away because of the intensity of the experience and the vulnerability of the situation. So in that sense, we didn't choose the vulnerability. The school itself put us in a very vulnerable situation, and what we were at that time, even the things we hated in each other or loved in each other, ended up being very much a function of what each person individually was experiencing from the stress of being evaluated constantly for your ability to create, for your ability to express. And it's just one of the people I went to school with, I ran into completely by chance 2 weeks ago. He's now a flight attendant on Air Canada, and like as soon as we connected, and I think I maybe said hi to him 3 times when I was at school, but we just had this great, like the whole 5-hour flight, I just hung up in front in the galley. We just talked about everything, talked about art, talked about all of those things, and that friendship somehow is in some way more real than the friendships that I have from people that I meet now, even if I really vibe really well with them, because of that shared experience, giving us a license to start at a place of more vulnerability and a shared vulnerability. So that's sort of my reaction to some of the things you were saying.
Yeah, there's something about like knowing that you can just go right in, and that the person's there, and that takes, especially in our culture, that takes a lot of trust, because
The trust piece,
I know for James and myself, I don't know how universal it is, but once you start wanting to go into vulnerability, you separate yourself from a lot of people in the world in terms of like being able to go all the way, because you're going to make a lot of people uncomfortable. And I just don't want to do that anymore. Like,
That's true.
People can do their own thing, and in the most extreme thing, I would just say most of culture is designed specifically to help people distract people themselves from vulnerability. It's just a set of things that can help people not have to sit and be with themselves. And if you think about how do people define prison? Being with yourself, being with your own thoughts. For some people, that's beautiful. They love to be with themselves. They love to be with their thoughts. We call that prison.
Well, with that being said, Jeff, I'd like to lead into something that you had talked about in a panel yesterday that I'd just like to bring up again, but expand a little bit, and that's the idea of cultivating emotional intelligence.
Just we'll do a cut here. Are you still okay on time?
Yeah,
We could do
that
a
was
quick one.
my alarm.
that was your-
so let me.
oh,
We
cool.
can
We
see,
could do
I think I got like a 2-minute.
Yeah?
2-minute
Let's
ending
do it.
for it. And
Cool.
I think it's a great one to end on.
cultivating emotional intelligence. Now this is really difficult because this has been going on for hundreds of years now. It's one thing to have a set of adults in society who are emotionally intelligent and want to teach that to the next generation. But right now you don't have that situation. You have a situation where you have basically an epidemic where very few people are comfortable with their range of emotions and feel that there are outlets for that range of emotions and feel safety and vulnerability and all this sort of thing. So I think we're in a really tricky time in terms of trying to cultivate emotional intelligence in children and education and that sort of thing, because you need to be taught from people who feel at ease with that. And when you look at any of these kind of things that come up in the world, you have the politician that is the most anti-prostitution has been seeing prostitutes, and the guy who's the most anti-finance stuff is shady dealing, all this kind of stuff. It's always like, this is how much we protect against our own shit. We don't want to see it, so we try to organize the entire world to not poke our shit. So I guess I was just starting in the sense of like, this is a real challenge, and I feel it in myself. I feel like, how many, just to make it reified a little bit, how many of us were surrounded growing up by men who could openly feel grief, shame, and anger without it becoming like a hurt somebody kind of anger. I don't know almost anybody that was. It's almost kind of like been like built out of the evolutionary process, and now we've turned into the rigid backbone kind of culture. So I'm not proposing many answers in my answer to you, except to say that we have our work cut out for us, but I think the work always starts with ourselves, you know? And I think, like, that's one of those tricks about all these things is, like, you know, we try so hard to change the world around us, but as soon as we change ourselves, every interaction we have with others is changing the world around us. And, you know, that line that I'm sure we all know is like, don't ask what the world needs, ask what makes you come alive, because what the world needs is is people that are alive. And I see when we were at MIT, when I was more and more frantic about issues and things, I saw that I was ignoring my own pain and feeling like there would be some condition in the world where everything would be perfect, and that's just never ever going to happen in a changing natural universe. But if we are who we inside want to be underneath all the fears that we've learned from everything around us, then maybe there are no problems, and maybe then it makes it really easy to solve all these other challenges.
Really, really quickly, I just finished 5 years in sort of the financial business world, and the feedback that I got most frequently was that I was just this exceptionally, like, guruistic, emotional intelligence thinker. I was like, I'm really not. Like, it's just comparative, right? Like, you guys are living in your financial models and you're trying to maximize your portfolios. Like, I kind of know when someone smiles, they're happy. But when I thought about, you know, what is it that I'm drawing on when I get that feedback, and it's all of the hours that I spent doing community theater in my small little community in Minnesota. It was like having to learn, you know, Shakespeare, and we weren't like a great theater, but we had a very serious director, and she was very serious, and she took every single student very seriously, and it didn't matter if they were going to be a professional or not, but she was going to make sure they understood the range of human emotions. And that's tough when you're 12 years old and you're playing Romeo, right? But she wants you to be able to go in there to understand what that passion is, or what that pain is, and to be able to say, you know, the way you're standing, that's not reading is pain, right? And so just for the student to say, okay, if I just drop my shoulders a little bit, if I just droop my head a little bit, you know, you're seeing that level of introspection or the pain or the defeat, and it seems silly, but anything like that, anything like dance, anything like theater, where it forces you to step outside and to think about how you are communicating a certain emotional state to an audience. I think there's no way to, like, you can't learn how to speak without also learning how to understand a language, speak a language without understanding that language. And for me, everything about emotion, everything about that, it is a language. It's a separate language to learn, but it's one that I think has to be learned at a very young age, because the barrier to entry for that sort of knowledge is much lower at that point. And it seems silly. It seems like such a bullshitty, like, hippie thing to say, like, oh, everyone should really go to their community theater. But, like, everything I got praised for in the world of finance and business came exactly from those 8 years of totally for free community theater training that I had.
Yeah, I guess the last note on that is everything that would take a week to learn when you're 4 years old, we spend 10 years in therapy trying to fix when you're 40.
That's a really good point.
We're just spending so much energy righting our own wrongs.
And to come back to the strength piece just really quickly, you know, almost everything that I think that I've learned at some point in junior high, I would have been teased and called a faggot.
Sure.
Everything I've drawn strength from is something that I had to swallow a lot of humiliation to do, whether it was dance, whether it was gymnastics, whether it was theater. Like, those are the things that I've drawn all my strength from, the things that were so easy to make fun of.
I'm gonna run.
Oh yeah. Well, thank you too very much for doing this and being part of this and letting me be here. This was awesome.
Thanks so much. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you, Jeff.
Cheers.
Thank you, James. I will see you at the panel. I'm gonna go to that one.
You got a little
James,
more time?
I'll see you probably at a talk or two tomorrow.
Yeah, absolutely. Hope so. Thanks
James,
again
I'll
for
see you
this.
this evening, James?
Yeah, indeed.
Thank you, guys. This was something else.
Cool, man. I'm glad we got to pair up.
Yeah.
Makes a lot more, you know, dynamics going around.
See you at Jeff.
Yeah. See you in the evening.
Well, that was a pretty successful experience. Take it easy. That was a lot of fun.
See you.